Hello everyone! Welcome to Untold History, the channel where we delve into the most shocking events that have left their mark on modern history. Today we dive into a particularly violent chapter of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Second Intifada, also known as the Al-Aqsa Intifada, which took place between 2000 and 2005. This uprising was a period of extreme violence, marked by suicide bombings, and harsh military repression by Israel. The conflict resulted in thousands of deaths and left a deep scar on both societies, forever affecting the path to possible peace in the region. Join us on this journey to understand a crucial part of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which began decades ago but is not yet in sight to be resolved. To understand the Second Intifada, it is crucial to first consider the background that led to its outbreak. In 1993, Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, under the leadership of Yasser Arafat, signed the Oslo Accords in an attempt to establish a peace process and reach a solution based on the creation of a Palestinian state. The Oslo Accords led to the creation of the Palestinian National Authority, PA, which was granted some degree of autonomy in some areas of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. However, despite the hope generated by these agreements, the peace process deteriorated rapidly. Israeli settlements in the West Bank continued to expand, and Palestinians faced increasing restrictions under Israeli military occupation. In addition, the Oslo Accords failed to address key issues such as the status of Jerusalem, the right of return for Palestinian refugees, and the final borders between Israel and a future Palestinian state. These rising tensions, coupled with the lack of tangible progress towards a peace agreement, led to growing frustration among the Palestinian population. The Second Intifada erupted on September 28, 2000, when Israeli political leader Ariel Sharon, then leader of the Likud party, made a controversial visit to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. This site is holy to both Muslims, who know it as Al-Haram al-Sharif, and Jews, and his visit was perceived by many Palestinians as a deliberate provocation. Tensions were already extremely high in East Jerusalem, the West Bank and Gaza, and Sharon's visit was seen as an attempt to reassert Israeli control over a site that is central to Palestinian religious and political identity. Sharon's visit sparked violent protests in East Jerusalem, which quickly spread across the West Bank and Gaza. The demonstrations soon turned into armed clashes between Israeli security forces and Palestinians. Unlike the First Intifada, which had begun as a largely nonviolent uprising, the second was marked from the beginning by intense violence. Israeli forces responded to the protests with gunfire, tear gas, and arrests, while Palestinians threw stones, Molotov cocktails, and, later, gun attacks. The climate of violence increased dramatically when Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups began carrying out a series of suicide bombings against Israeli civilians. These attacks, carried out on buses, restaurants, and shopping malls, generated a state of fear and panic in Israel. The Israeli military response was forceful, with raids on Palestinian cities, bombings of buildings, and attacks on leaders of militant groups. One of the most significant episodes was the siege of the Muqatta'eh in Ramallah, the headquarters of the Palestinian National Authority. Israeli troops laid siege to the compound where Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat was being held, accused by Israel of failing to stop the violence. Although Arafat denied being behind the attacks, the Muqatta'eh siege symbolized the total collapse of relations between Israel and the PA. During this time, Arafat became diplomatically isolated, and his authority over the Palestinian territories weakened, especially in Gaza, where Hamas gained greater influence. The use of suicide bombings by Palestinian militants was one of the most prominent features of the Second Intifada. These attacks, carried out by Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and, in some cases, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, a military faction linked to Arafat's Fatah party, inflicted large numbers of civilian casualties in Israel. The suicide bombings drew an international reaction of condemnation, and many countries began pressuring both Israel and the Palestinians to stop the bloodshed and return to negotiations. However, Israel, under the leadership of Prime Minister Ariel Sharon from 2001, responded to the attacks with a policy of increasingly harsh retaliation. Israel launched massive military operations in the West Bank and Gaza, occupying cities such as Nablus, Jenin, and Hebron, and destroying Palestinian infrastructure, including government headquarters, roads, and homes. In many areas, curfews were imposed for weeks or months, leaving Palestinians trapped in their homes without access to basic supplies. Life in the occupied territories was extremely difficult, with mass displacement, high levels of poverty and unemployment, and a total collapse of the economic infrastructure. The violence left deep scars on Israeli and Palestinian society. In Israel, the wave of suicide bombings has led to a shift to the right in domestic politics. The Israelis demanded greater security, which led to a heavy-handed policy on the part of the Sharon government. One of the most important developments was the construction of the separation wall, also known as the security barrier, which Israel began building in 2002. The barrier, which runs along the Green Line that separates Israel from the West Bank, was designed to prevent Palestinian militants from entering Israel. Although Israel justified the wall as a necessary security measure, Palestinians and many in the international community saw it as an attempt to annex Palestinian territories and further divide the land intended for a future Palestinian state. The separation wall, along with military checkpoints, made the daily lives of Palestinians even more difficult. Freedom of movement was severely restricted, and many Palestinians saw their agricultural land divided or confiscated for the construction of the wall. In addition, the construction of the wall in areas such as East Jerusalem and Bethlehem was seen as a direct violation of previous peace agreements and a way to consolidate Israeli control over areas that the Palestinians considered essential to their future state. The human cost of the Second Intifada was devastating. According to various sources, more than 3,000 Palestinians and approximately 1,000 Israelis were killed during the years of violence. The vast majority of Palestinian casualties were civilians, including many children, while a significant portion of Israeli casualties were caused by suicide bombings. The years of the Second Intifada also led to a generation of young Palestinians and Israelis growing up in the midst of conflict and mutual mistrust. One of the defining moments was the 2002 Operation Defensive Shield, a large-scale military offensive launched by Israel in response to a series of suicide attacks, including the attack on a hotel in Netanya during the Passover celebration, which killed 30 people. The operation was one of the largest deployments of Israeli forces in the West Bank since 1967 and focused on dismantling the infrastructure of Palestinian militant groups. The Battle of Jenin, one of the fiercest engagements of the operation, became a symbol of the brutality of the conflict, with both sides accusing each other of war crimes. As the Second Intifada continued, tensions between Fatah and Hamas also began to escalate. Although both groups were united in their fight against Israel, their approaches to how to handle the conflict were different. Hamas, with its Islamist rhetoric and refusal to recognize Israel, gained popularity, especially in Gaza, where living conditions were worsening by the day. Meanwhile, the Palestinian National Authority, led by Arafat, was increasingly weakened, both by Israeli pressure and by the lack of popular support among Palestinians who wanted to see concrete results in their struggle for independence. In November 2004, the conflict took a significant turn with the death of Yasser Arafat, who had been the face of the Palestinian national movement for more than 3 decades. Arafat died in a hospital in France after a brief illness, although his death was surrounded by speculation and rumors of poisoning. With his death, the Palestinians lost a charismatic leader who had been a symbol of their cause, but whose ability to negotiate peace had been seriously questioned in the final years of the Intifada. After Arafat's death, Mahmoud Abbas, also known as Abu Mazen, a more moderate leader within Fatah, assumed leadership of the Palestinian Authority. Abbas condemned the suicide bombings and promoted a return to peace negotiations. At the same time, conflict fatigue and international pressure led to hostilities beginning to subside. In 2005, an informal truce was reached, and both Israel and the Palestinians began to explore again the possibility of a peace process, although the wounds of the Second Intifada remained deep. One of the last major acts was Israel's unilateral withdrawal from the Gaza Strip in 2005 under the leadership of Ariel Sharon. Israel evacuated all Jewish settlements in Gaza and withdrew its troops, leading to the expectation that Gaza could be the first step toward the creation of a Palestinian state. However, the withdrawal also created a power vacuum in Gaza that would soon be filled by Hamas, laying the groundwork for future conflict between this group and Fatah. The Second Intifada left an indelible mark on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Although violence has subsided since 2005, internal divisions among Palestinians and the lack of a lasting political solution have kept the region in a state of constant tension. The walls, barriers, and checkpoints that were built during the Intifada continue to define the physical and political landscape of the region, while the legacy of violence continues to affect both societies. Thank you for joining us in this analysis of the Second Intifada. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for more revealing stories in Untold history. See you in the next one.